Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Glory Boy podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kyle Quinn, and joining me today is Phil De Bruyne from Beyond the Pitch. How's it going, Phil?
All good, mate. How you?
Not too bad, considering the horrendous season that the Manchester United have experienced. It's been a very low season from a fan point of view. But let's try and focus on a few positives today. So what's been doing the rounds in the last 24 hours is the Frenkie De Jong rumours. And we've been heavily linked with this player. Some good sources are reporting that well, good sources reporting that United are definitely in for him. A source in Spain is reporting that it's 95% chance that it's going to happen. Um, Obviously, I will remain cautious as I always do when it comes to big transfers on United every single summer. But I'm cautiously optimistic. What is your thoughts on it? Do you think United will sign this player this summer?
Saying him, I don't know, but there's definite interest in him. I've had that confirmed. Do like the player. He is obviously someone that, of course, Ten Hag likes. I would imagine once United get to the point where they're pursuing this transfer, they've got sufficient encouragement that that is something that can happen. I'm sure from the De Jong side. I'm sure there's dialogue between the De Jong and Ten Hag side. If you look at Barcelona has, he's been whistled off at times this season. I think he's only completed 90 minutes of like 14 times a season. I know that Xavi, Busquets is still the number one holding midfielder for Barcelona. De Jong's been played more an advanced role for Barcelona. They need the money. There's not many players on the books that they're capable of selling for big money. I think this is something that could happen. I also feel that when you look at how United are going about their business since Woodward has left and obviously the new transition, they're really desperate to eradicate a lot of the old negative images that they had before. And of course, transfers is one of them and how they went about, dragged them out. Matt Judge is gone, of course. I think they want to get business done relatively quickly. I think they want to get these signings over the line. What I was told is speculation is a bit ahead of reality. But things can change really quickly, and I think there's genuine interest there. And I think I wouldn't say it's 95% done. I wouldn't even say it's 50% done, but that could happen quickly. And I think there's definitely legs in this.
Absolutely no doubt at all that Ten Hag would want to bring him to Old Trafford. The doubts in my mind come from De Jong himself. He will have to go from a team that's second in La Liga to a team that could potentially be in the Europa Conference League, and from what we've heard is that he's enjoying life in Barcelona, him and his partner, and it's always the case, isn't it? When someone moves to Spain, they don't really want to leave Spain. So do you? I suppose the biggest selling point from United point of view is Ten Hag. Do you think that would be enough for him to give up living in Barcelona and playing for a team second in the Liga to drop down to Manchester United in a much colder climate, playing in the Europa Conference League? Do you think he'd be willing to do that?
I don't think the climate bothers Dutch players. I mean, the climate in Holland's similar to what it is in the UK. I think Barcelona is second, but they might as well be in another league. They're miles. I know they beat Real Madrid 5-0, but truthfully, they're miles off Real Madrid. They have to sell players. They're not a team who's going to win the Champions League anytime soon. I don't know who wants to play in the Champions League, but Barcelona are a team that can win the Champions League, nor United, to be fair. So I don't necessarily think that staying at Barcelona for the purpose of being successful would be a deciding factor, because I don't think that Barcelona team is going to be a serious threat to anyone in Europe for quite a while. So the question is, does he believe in Ten Hag's rebuild at Manchester United? What other players? I'd imagine that some of what is being sold to De Jong would be other potential signings, maybe other Dutch guys like De Ligt. I don't know. So I think it all depends. United are still a massive football club. They're still a massive draw. I know that they have had a poor season, but it's still Manchester United and it's still a massive football club. But if you're not wanted at your current club, and if you feel like you're being pushed out, we saw this with Jaap Stam at United. He didn't want to go to that, right? But was pushed out the door because United needed the money. They had, that's why they brought in Blanc on a free transfer. So I think, he may. He just got a house in Barcelona, but so Stam just had his kitchen fitted, if you remember. So these things happen in football, and if De Jong was to leave Barcelona, I don't know if there's a lot of better destinations that's available for him at this moment in time than United, given that it's still a massive football club. It's his old manager there. He hasn't had the best of seasons. He's 25. He needs to start finding his form again, and he may find that Van de Beek there, possibly another Dutch player coming in. I think it's an attractive prospect.
Yeah, many people will ask why would Barcelona want to sell such a great player, but it's obvious, isn't it? It's to do with their
Well, they need money.
financial difficulties.
That's the same reason why would any club want to sell their best player, but who's bottom of the table, because they need money.
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like something that is a possibility, but I won't get really excited just at the moment. So if United do sign him, what do you think the fee will be around? The rumored talk is 75 million mark. Do you think that would be accurate?
I think they could get him out of there cheaper. Barcelona are desperate to sell. You saw what they're doing with Coutinho. So I think they're going to be smart. They're going to be savvy. They're not just going to walk in and give Barcelona their asking price and they'll shoot it. I think they could probably get him out of there for maybe a bit less than what Barcelona paid for him.
So if he becomes like the big marquee signing, does that mean the rest of the budget will have to be spread around to 3 or 4 players? I doubt we're going to spend 75 million on more than one player. I can imagine the rest of the budget will then be used to bring in maybe 3 or 4 players that are 30, 40 million. Would you go along with that?
I still think that a striker will be the marquee signing, if you want to say that. I still can see United pushing the boat out for Darwin Nunez. I think what they'll do is they'll look to sign players paying these fees off over a period of time. There are some players United will look to sell, which I think will, help the budget. They're saving, I think it's 5 million a week. I think it is. No, sorry, that's not correct number. Actually, not far off it with the players that are leaving. So there's plenty of room on the wage bill for that. There's also players that will be sold. I think Dean Henderson will be sold for a decent amount. So I think there's also like Eric Bailly. It wouldn't surprise me to see United try to use Bailly in a swap deal with Pau Torres. Again, another player that they like would make sense. Villarreal want Bailly back. So I think that is. I think that there's still will be players that will be sold that are in that first team that will fetch good money. I think that will go into the budget.
Do you think there's a possibility that United could try and pick up maybe a free transfer this summer as well?
Sure, absolutely. Why not? Look, I'm not against free transfers because they're free transfers. There's good signings out there. You take advantage of it. I think Cavani was a good free transfer. Obviously, second half of last season was disappointing this season, but overall, you would say I think that first season he was exceptional. A really, really unique striker, and really United would never have qualified for Champions League without him. So in that sense, he paid for himself. But Dybala's on a free. There's lots of players on a free that if they were brought in as a second striker, there's nothing wrong with that.
A player who's available on a free, who I'm a huge fan of, is Christian Eriksen. The question is, do we have too many players in that position already, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously people are making the Ajax links and everything else. I don't think they're going to go for Christian Eriksen on a free transfer. I think there's still concerns, question marks over his long-term fitness. I know he's come back and played really well for Brentford, but I just don't think United will go down that road.
What about Kamara from Marseille? Do you think he could be an option in the defensive midfield area?
Well, Ten Hag wants two defensive midfielders. Kamara is more of a centre back defensive. Maybe can play as a defensive midfielder. I think that position is really, really important for United. That they need to have somebody that can play the ball in there, and I think that's partly why they want De Jong. They looked at Thiago. Solskjaer looked at Thiago before he went to Liverpool. And if you look at United's transitions, they're poor. So I think they badly need someone in the middle to a centre back that can play out with the ball, and a defensive midfielder that's capable of linking. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do there. But I don't think they'll go for that versatile type player that can also play here, play here, play here. I think that they're looking for specialists. Like if you look at Liverpool, and I think this is a model that they're going to copy. Most of their players have set positions. Right, they're not rotated. They're not pushed here. They're not putting Paul Pogba on the left wing and then defensive midfielder in here. I think they're going to look for players that have specific roles that are exceptional in the roles that they play, and they aren't shifted all around the place. I mean, Chelsea don't shift Jorginho all over the place. They don't shift Conte all over the place. I think United will look for players like that.
So it seems as if Ten Hag's trying to get the band back together, and there's been a few rumours today that Matthias de Ligt is also on Ten Hag's list. Could you see that happening as well?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I think look, we all know what transfer speculation does. This was always going to be this way. Right? This was always going to be. It's impossible to keep up with, and people are just being lazy. I do not see United signing Matthias de Ligt. I also don't think Juventus would sell him. I don't think they need to sell him. Chiellini's leaving. Chiellini, they played Italian Cup final or the weekend or yesterday, and he's leaving. So I don't think that will happen. No, they also sold Damaral, sold Christian Romero, so I don't think de Ligt will go.
No, I don't think so either. But if we signed like Darwin Núñez, Pau Torres, and Frenkie de Jong, I just couldn't. That's a lot of money. That's nearly 200 million, I would say. Even with the player sales, I don't think we'd be able to get all three of those players. So we're obviously going to have to look for some cheaper options in certain positions.
Depends. I mean, the Pau Torres thing. You could get him for a decent price if they were to put Bailly as part of the deal. You also get Bailly's wages off the books. So I think it is possible that could happen. I don't think you'll see anywhere near what Ranić was saying, 9-10 players, but I could see 4. I think they also have a problem at right back that need to be fixed. If they can get a buyer for Wan-Bissaka, there's lots of strong rumours that Crystal Palace are interested in bringing him back. If they could get 30 million for Wan-Bissaka, and give them money to get a right back in. I mean, you take a look at Inter Milan. Inter Milan sold Achraf Hakimi last summer, brought in Dumfries. That's been excellent. They're 2 points off AC Milan in the league title race. Big, they're in the league title race. Simone Inzaghi's done an excellent job. They just won the Coppa Italia. So I think that that with the sale of someone like Wan-Bissaka, Dean Henderson, they could easily stretch that budget to include. I mean, the players you just mentioned are all right down the spine of the team. I think they could easily stretch that budget to add 1 or 2 more.
I think we desperately need a right back. I think you could probably make do with Luke Shaw for another 12 months at least, but the right back area needs addressed urgently. Dumfries is another Dutch player that's been linked. It's just never ending. But I really would love to see a proper attacking right back being signed. I don't think Dallo is really up to it. I'd say most fans would probably agree with me on that. So I would like to see that being addressed this summer. But if we're going to focus on the spine, it probably might not happen. What do you think?
Well, as I was just saying, I think they of course do need a right back, but you start with the spine. You prioritize them down the middle, and then you build around that. And so what's important is that United don't do partial rebuilds. You don't sign players that you're going to build a team around and then lose interest in doing so. If you really need to build on what you're doing, which of course we saw when Paul Pogba was bought, never built a team around him, and never really fulfilled the promises that were made. And I still think in the right team, he's an exceptional player, but United never really kept their promises. This is what they can't do. And this is where I wanted to give Richard Arnold a chance, I suppose, because one thing that we have seen is it wasn't just a sacking of Solskjaer, Ranić. It was a sacking of an ideology too. And so you see massive ideological shifts inside United. I mean, John Murtough deserves a lot of credit because what we saw with the FA Youth Cup was down to John Murtough. John Murtough put that team together. And so that was a team that got relegated, of course. So for me, I think you worked on the spine of the team first, but Julian Timber, all these players are like this is all just lazy journalism because it gets clicks and downloads. But I think United will go about their business relatively quickly, the vast majority of it, to like I said, address some of the negative perceptions out there about how they operate.
Yeah, well, that certainly would be a first because most of our business seems to get done in August. If we could actually make
Well,
that
I would
happen in
say
June.
they were starting to improve on that. I mean, if you take a look at last season, I mean, they didn't drag those signings out. I think Varane was signed last. They got Sancho done in decent time. So I think to be fair to them, they have been doing better with that. Tellez as well.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, Sancho, we knew it was happening weeks before it did. I think the Euros obviously interfered with that. Varane, for some reason, it dragged out because of the visa or something, and he was announced just before the Leeds game in the middle of the pitch, and then Ronaldo just came out of nowhere with a couple of days of the window left.
Well, it was
Um,
COVID. I mean, COVID was playing a big role, obviously, and high players could travel at that time. But I mean, the Varane deal was done. I mean, it was just a question of doing the formalities. So you can't fault United for that. And I think, yeah, I think
well,
they deserve some credit because they have been making some changes. There's no question. And let's be honest, Kel, most of us felt that United were a defensive midfielder away last summer from challenging for the league title, based on what we'd seen the year before. So uh, I think, like, yeah, they deserve a lot of criticism for things that they've done, but also they deserve praise too.
well, they appointed a manager in April, and that's certainly progress. They certainly didn't dither with that one. We've seen like in the past David Moyes starting on July the 1st, and Van Gaal starting after the World Cup, and stuff like that. So they've definitely made progress there. So today we've heard in the media about John Murda flying down Amsterdam to meet Ten
Mm-hmm.
Hag, his assistant Van der Gaag, and Steve McLaren apparently as well. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that pretty much confirms that McLaren is going to be part of the coaching setup?
Well, there'd be no other reason for him to be there. I mean, you and I might as well be there then. I mean, Steve McLaren's there because he's clearly a part of the process of what United are going to be doing going forward. There's no other reason to have him there. He's not there as a translator. You know? So to me, I would say yes, he will be involved.
How do you feel about that? Someone who was a coach 20 odd years ago coming back to the club. Do you think it's a good move?
Well, I mean, when he was at United, it was during when they won the European Cup. So they won the treble that year. So if he's in the right role, I don't see the problem with it. I don't see I don't really think he's going to be a massive factor in making long term decisions. I think at United, I think he's a good coach. Different, maybe not a great manager, but a good coach.
Yeah, he seems to, no way, sometimes mud sticks, and he's been labelled the Wally with the Brolly because what happened with England and stuff. But I think that's a bit unfair. Maybe he's just one of those guys that he's a great number two and just not a fantastic number one. And the most important thing is Ten Hag should be able to choose who he wants, and if
Yeah,
he wants McLaren, then I'm happy enough. I'll go along with what he wants.
agree.
Okay, we've seen Ronaldo win Premier League Player of the Month again. He just seems to keep winning things, even when United are terrible. The man's just a phenomenon. Do you think he's going to be here next season? I really hope that he is.
Oh, there's no question he's going to be here next season. If Ronaldo's not going to be United next season, you'd know it by now. Uh, there's nowhere for him to go, so he'll definitely be here next season. Yeah.
And even though he'll be giving up Champions League football, and he hasn't played in the Europa League since 2002.
Well, he's 37 years of age. He's not 27. This would be an issue if he was smack bang in the prime of his career. Then I can understand Ronaldo saying, "Hey, I want to go to pastures new." This is, but you're 37. He makes an absolute fortune. He wouldn't be the same at somewhere else. Like if he went to PSG or something, he wouldn't be the same monster that he is commercially for United. There's a certain symmetry with Manchester United and Cristiano Ronaldo that helps his brand and image. He's at a football club where he's most people heavily identify him with. So I think plus United are masters at monetizing people. So I think for him, this is the best place.
Um, do you see a scenario then that maybe he will start most of the Premier League games and then the striker that we sign will play in the European games? Or do you see Ronaldo just playing every single game as always?
Yeah, so this really is the question because Cristiano Ronaldo has to play. He's not going to tolerate sitting on the bench, and that's where you could get really toxic issues inside the dressing room. The question is, does Ten Hag, play a 37-year-old every week? I don't know, but I don't see Ronaldo's status. I mean, look, he's been one of the only bright spots for United this season. He's proven he can still score goals at this level. Um, if Ronaldo was playing for City or Liverpool, Ronaldo would be on 30 plus goals easily. So, yeah, I still think he'll start.
So even though Ralf Rangnick has taken up the job as the Austrian national team coach, there's a lot of British journalists who reckon that he doesn't have a long-term future at United. That this consultancy role, he won't see that 2-year contract out. Do you subscribe to that, or do you think that he will be there, helping United make decisions?
Well, first of all, consultancy rule is such a broad brush anyway, right? I mean, what does that mean? Does that mean you ring him once a month to ask his opinion? Does that mean you ring him once a year? Does that mean you talk to him every week? I mean, my 3-year-old is a consultant in my house. I don't listen to her. So ultimately, it's an irrelevant. I think it was more to save face than anything else. And it certainly isn't impacting Ranick's decisions on his future. So I honestly, I don't think it's relevant, and I think what Ranick's done the job, the most important job that he's brought in to do. Yes, I know he's brought in as a coach, hasn't worked out well for him. I'll admit that. But really, if you look at United's trajectory, where it started to really taper, fall off, was right round about that Mason Greenwood time. Because prior to that, if you go back, Ranick started it okay, right? I think he had only one loss in 12 games or something. United weren't conceding goals. He was doing all right. But once all that started to happen, then things started to change. But to me, I'd far rather Ranick was doing what he was doing and calling out people that need to be called out, saying in the media what needs to be said. You have to also remember that Ralph Ranick was advertising for his next job. I'm trying to do what Mourinho was doing and create separation between the failures at the football club and him. And so I think he's done a good job at that.
Yeah, the fans have really appreciated his honesty, but
Mm-hmm.
as a coach, it hasn't been a success. He hasn't really got a tune out of these players. He seems to be a huge fan of Christopher Nkunku at Red Bull Leipzig. He probably brought him to the club. Could you see him as maybe a possibility, or like a backup option to Nunez, maybe?
Yeah, I think Ranić likes him, but the question is, does Ten Hag? Because that's really the only question worth answering. So if Ranić was staying as a manager, sure, I could see something like that happening. Um, with Ten Hag, I honestly think United will send Darwin Nunez. But like if you listen to one of the things that Ranić was saying earlier in the season about Cavani, he was one of the only players they had that could play with his back to goal. United badly need a striker like that, and so I mean, I think if they would move on to someone like that, if the ball or sorry, if Nunez doesn't come.
I tell you what, you've been very, very optimistic about United's chances in this transfer market, and I have to say I
They'll be
wasn't really
busy.
expecting that.
No, look, you need to look at every time they hire a manager. When they're his first season, they're aggressive in the market, and it usually is on the back of not qualifying for the Champions League. Hence, why the previous manager was sacked. So United are working really, really hard to change their negative perception in the media. I think they also recognize where they're at. They're not at City's level. They're not. They can't be going in for. City need one or two little tweaks, which is why you can spend 100 million on a player. United need so much more than that, and you have to build from the ground up, and you have to build on solid foundations, or whatever you build will fall apart. And I think those are the things you need to fix this summer more than anything. Um, they have to have strict parameter controls from the very top down on behaviour. They have to incentivize players differently. They have to incentivize staff differently. Um, those things take time to change. So I think United shouldn't try to compete with City financially. Nobody can. Um, but it's clear they're looking at the Liverpool model and trying to copy that.
So speaking of building the foundations, last night the United under 18s won the FA Youth Cup for the first time since 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Garnacho being the star of the show. How did you feel about that? Were you pleased to see that? I mean,
Yeah,
there was nearly 70,000 people at Old Trafford for that game. That's amazing. It just shows you how desperate United fans were for something positive to cheer about this season.
yeah, no, look, it's great for those kids. But one of the things you need to remember: youth development's not about good teams; it's about good players. And so you can have an FA Youth Cup winning team, and none of those players are good enough to play for the first team. None of those players, they're all good at that level, but don't have the ability to go and play for the first team. That's a failure. Because the whole raison d'etre of youth development is to get young players into your first team. And you could also have a team where they finish mid-table, but they've got two players that are really, really good, that are good enough to get into your first team. That's a success. That's what youth development is all about. In fact, the manager, the under-18s manager, actually said this yesterday. So it goes, if I don't get players in their first team, no one cares that I won the FA Youth Cup, right? So I think that's the measure of success. More, it's great to see them winning trophies. Great to see them doing well. Great to see the kids putting on a performance that the fans appreciate it. But the ultimate metric of whether youth football, your youth team is successful or not, is how many players you get in their first team.
Yeah, well, I seen a stat from Rob Dawson, ESPN, that every time United have won the FA Youth Cup, one player from that team has made at least 80 appearances for the first team.
Mm-hmm.
So it bodes well for someone, and obviously, like most of the fans will believe, it'll probably be Garnacho who'll make it into the first team. Would you like to see him start against Crystal Palace, next Sunday?
Look, one of the things you saw last night is as talented as these kids are, they're miles off Premier League standard,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so there's so many other layers. United have recognised this for a long, long time. Hence the reason why they used to have partnerships with Antwerp and Sport and Lisbon, everything to make sure that jump is done organically and it's done properly. You're not having quantum leaps from the under 18s. Every once in a while, you'll get a kid where it's blatantly obvious they're good enough at Paul Scholes, Messi's, whatever.
really.
Right? Yeah, of course, right? But most kids aren't like that. And so United have always known that, look, the championship, you see it, James Garner, right? James Garner went to Swans, it didn't work out. Look, like, oh, he's not good enough, goes to Forest and thrives, gets the right club. You look at Ahmad, right, going up to Rangers, wasn't playing, right? To Heath Jong, all these players that everyone thought, Angel Gomez, all these players thought they're amazing. They're just, why aren't they playing what they're playing? And then you see them at this level and you realize they're quite a bit off. So I think for Ranić, look, United are in a, if you go back to 1999, whenever United were going to Club World Cup, and they said to Ferguson, why don't you just play the kids in the FA Cup? And he said, we're in the process of building careers, not wrecking them. So I think you have to be very, very careful of throwing kids in. You can get away with it in the last game, a meaningless last game of the season where no one's really paying attention, especially when all eyes are going to be in the title race. But and Crystal Palace aren't playing for anything much, and they aren't really playing for anything. And the Wolves lost against City, and they're in the Europa League, Conference League. So I could see one or two kids coming off the bench, but I don't think they'll start.
Yeah, it's usually a game, the 38th game of the season. It's usually an opportunity to give a few youngsters their debuts, and I wouldn't mind the likes of Garnacho and Alfaro Fernandez, making their debuts in that game. But I have to admit, even if the youngsters do start or come off the bench, um, I see this as a game that has all the ingredients for a Crystal Palace win by 5 or 6, because we know this United team have checked out long time ago. Crystal Palace are in really good form, playing well at home. They've taken a few scalps this season, and we know that the 38th game week tends to throw up a lot of bizarre scorelines. So I wouldn't be surprised here if United get absolutely mauled at Selhurst Park.
At this point, United fans aren't even paying attention really to the results because they're utterly meaningless. Everyone's eyes are on next season. And even if they do play kids, Josh Harrop scores on his debut at Old Trafford, never heard of again, at that level. So I think we have to be careful about kids coming in and having a good game and calling them, even Garnacho, it's exciting. He's a good young player, but there's still so many things to prove. And you look at Alanga misses a penalty, and this kid gets slaughtered. Right, this is why it's really risky to put kids in, because even back in '99, they didn't have social media. The crescendo of abuse that comes players' way when they don't do when they aren't living up to some unrealistic expectation in the first place. I mean, senior players like Harry Maguire and stuff found this really difficult. I can't imagine how difficult it would be. Imagine Garnacho missing an open net or missing some. The abuse this kids would take would be unbelievable, and the narrative would change on him immediately. Oh, he's crap, because I used to say the last 90 minutes defend people's opinion. The last 9 minutes defends people's opinion. Right? I mean, I'm a big fan of boxing, and I'm watching people now rewrite Canelo Alvarez's career because he lost the weekend. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I think probably the next step in 1 or 2 years for Garnacho would be to find his own kind of Nottingham
Mm-hmm.
Forest loan move. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe we should have a contract with Forest the way we did with Royal Antwerp all those
Well,
years
Forest
ago.
are on the verge of getting promoted, so
Well, obviously they'll have to come through the playoffs to make that happen now. But
mm.
yeah, Jimmy Garner has had a magnificent season at Forest. Do you think he'll be part of the United squad next season? Do you think he'll at least be on the bench on match days?
I do. I think United will bring him back simply because of numbers. I mean, especially being in the Europa League, they're going to have to rotate a lot. So I think, considering how many players we've left, and the fact that we've just talked about where United need to stretch our budget, I can see James Garner being brought back in as a squad player and given the opportunity to force his way in on a permanent basis.
Yeah, he looks like he keeps improving all the time. He seems to be a midfielder who can spread the ball left and right. He takes great free kicks and corners, and he scores goals. He gets assists. So if he can go up another few levels, definitely could end up becoming a starter eventually for United. Who knows? And I'm with a Dutch manager in charge now, and we all know the Dutch managers have a reputation for blooding young players and bringing youth players through into the first team. It couldn't be a better time for a young player at United to get an opportunity to get themselves into the first team.
Well, I mean, there's that, and of course, there's Van de Beek. We're all curious to see what happens there when he gets called back. I do find it a bit odd, where I think we're 2 years in, and Van de Beek has had almost no memorable games, even for Everton, that we're still talking about. He just needs the right manager. He just needs the right this, the right that. Um, what if he doesn't play under Ten Hag? Are we still going to turn around and say he needs the right manager? So to me, I think Manchester United, the club like to say is Manchester United, you don't get 2 years to prove you're at that level. You must do it quickly. I mean, you hear Pep Guardiola talking about Jack Grealish saying, when they asked him, what about Jack Grealish finding his form next season? He goes, no, he needs to find it now. Not next season, now. And so, you can't afford to have that time at United. So for Van de Beek, this really is a last chance saloon for him.
Yeah, he's impressed in bits and pieces really, but then again, he was only getting the odd sub appearance and the odd start here and there. He wasn't really getting like 5 games in a row or anything like that. And there was even like I even remember the game against Young Boys where he finally started, and then he was hooked because Wan-Bissaka got sent off. That's kind of just the way things were going for him. But you're right, he hasn't really done that well at Everton. So it's last chance saloon really. If he can't do it under Ten Hag at Old Trafford, it's never going to happen for him, is it?
No, and looks, if you looked at when he came back last season, one of the most obvious things was he bulked, and that was clearly because he was told to. I think there was also concerns about his positional play. There was a game 2 years ago against Southampton at Old Trafford. Now, he conceded 2 late goals when he came on as sub, and Solskjaer felt that he was responsible because he wasn't holding shape. Southampton scored really, really late in that game as well. And he I don't think he played again for a couple of months after that. So bulk and positional play were two big things for him. Ten Hag got the best out of him, of course, at Ajax, but in the Dutch league is there's some exceptional players, but there's also some bad ones.
Yeah, I think not to go back to Solskjaer, but he wanted Jack Grealish, didn't he? I don't think Van der Beek was particularly high in his transfer list, but that's the player he ended up with because of the COVID market and all that. And Van de Beek was available because Madrid couldn't sign him anymore, didn't have the finances, and he's available with 40 million. And United just went and got that deal done then. But now is the real opportunity for him. With the manager who made his career at Ajax taking charge of United now. So wait and see how it works out. Um, so what about the captaincy? Who do you think will Ten Hag will appoint as our captain next season?
I think that's a really good question because I think it's up in the air. I think there isn't a lot of obvious options in my opinion. Uh, I don't think Ronaldo should be captain. I think when you look at a guy who gets taken off in a game against Brentford, and behaves like he did, I don't think that's a captain. He's a brilliant player, a winner and all that there, but Ronaldo's about Ronaldo. So it's going to be really interesting because whoever they pick, they have to stick with. It's not something you can change. Wouldn't surprise me to see someone like a Bruno Fernandes take it.
You mentioned there Ronaldo's petulance when he was brought off against Brentford. But what about Bruno Fernandes, constantly yapping at referees every single game, just contesting every single decision? I know people will say, "Oh, Roy Keane always did that," but it just seems to be he does it all game, every game. He's in the referee's ear, and then he simulates quite a lot as well. Bruno Fernandes, that's not really what I see. I know I'm probably of the old school, but that's not really what I see a Manchester United captain doing. So there is flaws with him as well when it comes
Um,
to being the leader of the team. So there's not many obvious candidates, really, is there?
well, there isn't, but there's a massive difference between a player sniping at a referee and a player sniping at the rest of his players. So players are not going to take it personal if a particular player is sniping at a referee, but they will take it personal if someone walks off, throws his shin pads down, throws his boots down, doesn't want to come off for the player that just come on for him, thinks I should be playing no matter what. And that's totally different. And so I think there is no perfect candidate right now. But Bruno Fernandes to me looks like someone that's frustrated with the situation rather than a protagonist of it.
Could you imagine if Ten Hag kept Harry Maguire as captain, how that would go down with the faithful at Old Trafford?
Well, you know what? He may sign players that we don't want. He may sign players that we don't like. He may do things like that. That's he's in this wonderful honeymoon period right now where he can't do anything wrong. But what if he signs Sebastian Haller as United's main striker? Fans will go nuts, right? So, but this is what I'm saying. Like, I mean, then all of a sudden, he'll start getting called a fraud and all this nonsense, and it'll be insufferable. So, this is his strongest moment because he hasn't put a foot wrong yet. This is where all the love-in happens because everyone's filled with hope and optimism. That'll wear off soon. So I think this is where we're going to have to say, look, this guy knows what he's doing. I wouldn't sign that player, but I have to assume that he knows something I don't.
Yeah, just anyone but Maguire as captain will suit me. I don't want Maguire in the starting 11, if I'm being honest. But it does seem unlikely that he'll be sold this summer. So what do you think the central defensive pairing will be at the start of the season? Do you think Maguire will be part of that, or do you think he'll be on the bench?
I think he'll start. But I obviously can see United sign another centre back. I don't think he would get the time that he's got this season to get things right if he's continuously making mistakes. Thinking that will have to have something, and a Pau Torres and Varane somewhere, of that ilk where you can make those changes comfortably and not worry about the player that's coming in is not up to the particular standard. So I also feel that Maguire would look a lot better in a much better team. So it's possible Maguire could find his form again next season under a new manager, different system, everything else. And a lot of the things we're talking about would disappear.
Yeah, we desperately need another centre half because Varane seems like he's going to miss half of the Premier League games every season with his injury record.
Well, so he was injured. He's injured in Madrid too, so this is not new.
Yeah, so we need a centre back, a top centre back who's going to play 38 Premier League games or somewhere close to it, and because Varane's going to keep missing games, and then we're going to be back to Maguire and Lindelof, which is a partnership which I don't rate very highly. There's a real lack of pace there. So Finally, I'll come on to Jadon Sancho. Do you think that he will excel under Ten Hag? Obviously, he started off very slowly, and then towards January to March, he really exploded a wee bit, and then he's kind of tailed off in the last month or so. And he's been out injured the last few weeks. But do you think that
Yeah, I
he
do.
will excel?
Yes, I do. I think technically he's excellent. Maybe if there's one gap in his game, it's his pace. But I think what we saw at Borussia Dortmund, I think we'll see an improved and much better Sancho this season. Um, but players can look bad, and it's a hard team to look good in, because there is no team, right? As essentially you're an individual. You can't be an individual in the Premier League; it's too good. Also, when you're individuals with the ball, not individuals without the ball. So what are you without the ball? And so I think for Sancho, he will improve immensely in a much better team that plays to his strengths. This is where the fullback is really, really important because that whoever plays Sancho starts on the left. There has to be a relationship between the fullback and Sancho. If you remember, one of the best years of Shaw's career was whenever he had that relationship with Memphis Depay, right? And then he got injured. He was playing really, really well before that, and so under Mourinho, he had the wingers play really deep because of what Ralph Hasenhüttl was saying about how you need to cheat in between the lines and you get a lot of space. So Mourinho knew this, didn't trust his forwards, and played relatively defensive. So I think the key to getting the best out of Sancho will be who the left back is or right back is, wherever he plays.
Yeah, definitely. I've got very high hopes for Jadon Sancho. He's come in for £73 million,
Hmm.
and we've seen glimpses this season of what he can produce. That period between January and March, I think he really exploded onto the scene, and we want to see him play like that for an entire season, and then obviously season after season. I do think he's got a very high ceiling as a player. I think he's got much more to come. Is that how you feel about him as well?
Yeah, I agree. I think there's much more to come. I think when you look at how his partnership with Holland, they don't have a player like that. They don't have a consistent striker like that. So I think he will improve immensely next season.
And just one last we talking point. Do you think Ten Hag won't mind the fact that David de Gea, his distribution isn't the greatest, and we know he's an amazing shot stopper. Will go down as one of our greatest ever goalkeepers. But also, in the modern game, it's all about sweeper keepers. Do you think Ten Hag will be okay with that, at least in the short term?
I hear a lot about this, and I genuinely think this is overplayed. I was watching Allison last night or the night before, uh, getting caught out trying to be sweeper keeper, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
almost
they
conceded
all do.
against Villa. Yeah. So I think first and foremost, a goalkeeper needs to be a goalkeeper. He needs to be good at stopping shots, right? I don't want a sweeper. Otherwise, I put my centre back and go, right? That so David De Gea is very, very good at the basics. He's not a perfect goalkeeper, but when it comes to problems addressed at Manchester United that they need to address this summer, he's way down the list.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with you on that. And do you think he could be a nomination for the captaincy? Could he be a candidate for that?
Possibly, yeah, possibly, yes. I mean, I've liked what De Gea said. Again, I would back up with what I said about Bruno Fernandes, where De Gea looks frustrated with the situation. I mean, he's one of the players that was there last night at the Youth Cup, um, and of course, he remembers how it used to be. So he's a long-term goalkeeper, he's a long-term player at the club, senior player at the club. So yeah, I think it could happen.
Yeah, I remember De Gea's interview after the Everton defeat, and he was extremely angry, and he,
Hmm.
he, he told it how it was, and the fans really appreciated that. Clearly, it mattered to him. A lot of these United players have been accused of not caring about losing games this season, but he clearly is someone who's annoyed by how things have been going this year.
Sure.
So I imagine that the Player of the Year award will go to Ronaldo rather than De Gea because you know to see a face really because you don't want to give a goalkeeper the Player of the Year award every single season. It's the way it feels like. So any opportunity to take it away from De Gea, I'd imagine the club
Well,
would
I
go
think
with.
Ronaldo deserves it anyway.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so really looking forward to Ronaldo. playing here for another season and breaking more records and hopefully maybe winning a trophy at United before he retires. But I just want to see a team that's committed, a team that entertains. I'm not even thinking about trophies at the moment.
No, I agree. I think that's what most United fans took from the FA Youth Cup was just good to see something completely different from what we've been seeing for months.
So fantastic to have you on the show again, Phil.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to do it anytime.
Okay, everybody, please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on all our social media pages. And we'll see everyone again next week.
Take it easy, mate. Thanks, folks. See ya. Bye.